Real power is when your presence changes the room, even before you say a word. It's that moment when someone sees you again after they took you for granted, and they feel it in their chest. That gut punch, that pause, that subtle realization that you're not the same anymore. You didn't yell, you didn't argue, you evolved, and now they feel it. This isn't about silence, folks. This is about presence. That energy you carry when you've gone through the fire and came out refined, not burned. When you stop explaining yourself and start embodying your worth, they feel that, and they'll never forget that feeling. If you're already starting to feel this, like this video, subscribe to the channel and type "I am untouchable" in the comments. Not just to say it, but to own it. Say it with your chest. Say it like you mean it. Because we're about to shake up everything you thought power was supposed to look like. Now let's talk. You've probably been told your whole life that power is in being louder, stronger, faster, more aggressive. That to be respected, you have to be seen, heard, validated by everyone around you. But what if I told you, real power isn't in domination, but in alignment, in becoming so rooted in who you are that you don't flinch when someone else doesn't see it? Let me give you a real example. A man gets dumped by someone who didn't see his potential. They thought he'd fall apart. Instead, he transformed, hit the gym, built his business, focused on his inner growth. He didn't become petty, he became precise, and one day they seize him, years later, not even trying, and suddenly they hit by this energy they can't explain. That's real power, not because he won, but because they didn't need them to see it for it to be real. That's what this video is about. Emotional evolution, quiet conviction, magnetic energy, not passive silence, but that active pulsing force of someone who knows who they are. Because when you change from the inside out, your energy speaks a different language. People feel it. In your body language, in your eye contact, in the way you walk into a room, not looking for approval, but bringing presence with you. It's in the way your tone carries calm certainty instead of desperate emotion. It's the way you protect your peace without guilt. That's a power they don't know how to challenge, and it messes with them. They'll remember how you used to chase, how you used to over-explain, and now they'll remember the stillness in your strength, the calm in your movement, the growth in your distance. And let me tell you this. When someone underestimates you and you evolve instead of engage, they never forget that version of you. It haunts them, not because you're trying to haunt them, but because they lost something they can't get back. Not you, but the access to who you used to be. So if you've ever been walked on, talked over, overlooked, this video is your blueprint to becoming the kind of person whose very presence is unforgettable. No need to scream it. No need to post about it. Just be it. Say it with me again in the comments. I am untouchable. And stay with me, because this is the moment they start feeling what they never appreciated. And you start becoming what they can never forget. Number 1, stop explaining your growth. They won't understand it at first. That's the part you have to accept. When you start evolving, emotionally, mentally, spiritually, people who were once close to you may suddenly feel like strangers. Not because you've become arrogant, not because you've changed for the worse, but because you're no longer playing small for their comfort. And when that shift happens, the first thing they'll ask is, what happened to you? Here's the answer you never have to give out loud. I outgrew the version of me that needed your approval. Growth is uncomfortable, not just for you, but for the people who only knew you when you were convenient, when you were always available, always agreeable, always doubting yourself. They got used to that version of you, the one who over-explained, who apologized for having boundaries, who stayed quiet to keep the peace. But now, you've changed, and they feel that. The problem is, when you change, the world around you starts resisting. They want the old you back, the one that didn't make them question their own reflection. That's why they'll accuse you of being distant, cold, selfish, or different. And that's okay. Let them. Growth doesn't need a press release. It just needs consistency. But here's where most people fall. They try to explain themselves. You feel guilty, right? You want them to understand you. You want them to know you're not trying to hurt anyone. So you write long messages. You have deep conversations hoping they'll finally get it. But here's the truth that'll save you years of emotional exhaustion. You don't owe anyone an explanation for becoming better. Let me say that again for the people still healing. You do not owe anyone an explanation for becoming harder to manipulate, easier to respect, and impossible to ignore. The only reason you feel the urge to explain is because deep down, a part of you still fears abandonment, still craves understanding. But listen, your growth isn't a group project. Not everyone will clap for your glow-up, and you've got to be okay with that. So what's the solution? Redirect the energy. Instead of putting that energy into convincing people that you've grown, put it into embodying it. Let your actions become the living proof. When they ask why you don't argue anymore, show them your peace. When they wonder why you don't show up for chaos, show them your focus. When they call you distant, show them your direction. They'll get it, eventually. Because here's what happens. People don't truly hear your explanations, but they feel your transformation. They feel the change in your presence, the way you don't respond to bait, the way you protect your peace without guilt, the way your eyes say, "I know who I am now," even if your lips never do. You want to know what real emotional power looks like. It's walking away from the need to be understood and walking toward the peace of simply being aligned. It's choosing inner harmony over external approval. It's realizing that your healing is more important than their comfort. And yes, it will hurt. At first, you might lose people. You might feel alone. You might start to second-guess whether becoming stronger was worth it. But then the shift happens. You stop craving their validation. You stop needing to explain your choices. And instead, you start asking yourself new questions. Does this feel right for me? Is this helping me grow? Am I honoring the version of myself I'm becoming? That's the moment your life starts changing, not because others finally understand, but because you finally stopped needing them to. So if you're in that messy middle, where you're healing, evolving, building, and still tempted to look back, this is your reminder. Growth doesn't wait for applause, and power doesn't beg to be recognized. Let them wonder, let them gossip, let them misunderstand. That's not your business anymore. Your business is building, your business is becoming, your business is protecting your energy and moving like someone who knows they've already been chosen by life, by purpose, by themselves. Stop explaining, start embodying. Because the people meant for you won't need a paragraph to understand your silence. They'll feel the energy, and the ones who don't, they were never really listening anyway. So if this hit home, write it in the comments right now. I don't explain, I embody. And stay with me, because the next part we're stepping into will take this even deeper. We're about to explore the emotional shift that happens when you stop chasing and start commanding the room through pure presence. You've laid the foundation. Now it's time to turn that energy into a magnet. Ready? Let's go. Number 2. Control your energy. Control the room. There's a moment in life when you realize that not every reaction deserves your energy. Not every insult needs a clap back. Not every emotional trigger is your responsibility to respond to. And when you hit that moment, you feel something that many people never experience in their lifetime: emotional mastery. Now let's be clear. This isn't about bottling things up or pretending nothing affects you. It's about stepping into such powerful self-awareness that you know exactly when to speak, when to step back, and when to walk away, without guilt, without fear, and without losing your balance. That, my friend, is not weakness, that is power. Too often people associate calmness with cowardice. They think if you're not yelling, you're afraid. If you're not reacting, you're defeated. But let me give you the real truth. The person who can feel everything and still choose peace is the strongest one in the room. When someone throws chaos your way and you don't flinch, they feel that. They might not say it, but internally they register that you're not playing their game. They expected you to get emotional, to beg, to defend, but instead you stood there, still, grounded, composed, and in that moment, you took back all the power. Let me share something real. I once knew a man who had a reputation for being explosive, loud, dominant. He controlled every room by force. But the day his calm, collected partner stood up, walked away and said nothing, the energy shifted. He couldn't understand why her quiet felt heavier than his rage, why her peace rattled the walls he built with noise. That's the difference between noise and power. One seeks attention, the other commands respect. So what's the solution? Learn to master your emotional frequency. That means becoming aware of what drains you and what strengthens you. You don't just react anymore, you respond. You pause, you process, you speak with purpose. That's not weakness, that's wisdom. Here's how you build it. Start by noticing your patterns. Do you explode when you feel disrespected? Do you shrink when someone ignores you? Do you chase after clarity from people who only give you confusion? That's not emotional strength, that's emotional addiction. But once you recognize it, you reclaim control. Now replace reaction with reflection. When something triggers you, ask, is this worth my energy? Is this about them or about me? Will this matter in 3 weeks or even 3 days? That one question alone can save you from hours of emotional regret. And then choose how to move, not from anger, not from fear, but from clarity. You don't need to explain your silence. You don't need to prove your peace. You just need to live it. People will test you. Oh, they will. Especially when they realize their old tricks no longer work. They'll poke, provoke, push. But you've shifted. You've upgraded. You no longer react because you no longer need to. This doesn't mean you've become numb. No, you still feel deeply. But now you feel with direction. You no longer hand your emotions to people who haven't earned your vulnerability. And that right there changes everything. Because when your energy is stable, your presence becomes rare. Think about it. How many people do you know who can stand in chaos and not become part of it? Who can feel disrespected and still move with grace? Who can face emotional warfare and still choose inner peace? Not many, but you're becoming one of them. And that's why people won't forget you. Not because you shouted, not because you made a scene, but because you carried yourself like a storm that had already passed, but left everything different. This is the kind of power that makes people reflect. They replay your words, not because you screamed them, but because of the weight you carried when you said nothing. They rethink their choices, not because you guilted them, but because your energy held up a mirror they weren't ready to face. You don't have to be cold. You don't have to cut everyone off. You just have to stop leaking your energy into people who drain it and start pouring it back into yourself. That's how you control the room, by controlling yourself. So here's your action step. The next time someone tries to pull you into their chaos, take a breath. Anchor into your chest. Feel the ground under your feet. And remember, they don't have power unless you hand it to them. Say this with me in the comments. My energy is mine. Not their playground, not their testing ground, yours. Because when you master your emotions, you master your reality. And when you master your reality, they'll never forget the feeling of being in your presence. Now stay with me. because in the next part, we're diving into what happens when you remove your energy completely, when you pull back, and the entire game changes. You're not just learning to be strong, you're learning to be unshakable. Number 3, pull back, don't push forward. There's something deeply powerful about pulling back your energy, not as a punishment, but as a pivot. A quiet decision within yourself that says, this version of me, it's no longer available on demand. You see, when we feel undervalued, ignored, or misunderstood, the most natural impulse is to push, to try harder, to talk more, to show up with greater intensity in hopes that they'll finally see what they've been blind to. But here's the truth, my friend. You cannot force someone to feel your worth if they've already decided to overlook it. Pushing forward becomes a trap. You send long messages. You over-explain your intentions. You chase closure, clarity, confirmation. You give and give until you're left tired, bitter, and depleted, still without the validation you were hoping for. It's like watering a dead plant. No matter how much love you pour in, it won't bloom again if its roots have rotted. So what's the solution? Pull back, not with resentment, not with drama, but with quiet certainty. Pull back your availability, pull back your emotional labor, pull back your need to be seen by someone who refuses to look. And here's where the shift happens. When you do this with peace instead of pain, they feel it. Even if they never admit it out loud, trust me, they feel the absence of what they took for granted. Think about this in everyday life. When your phone battery hits 1%, you panic, right? You start looking for a charger, you feel the urgency. But when the battery is always full, always reliable, always there, you take it for granted. That's how people treat your energy when it's always available. But when you pull back, that sudden emptiness exposes their dependency. That's when the wake-up call begins. Let me share something real. I once watched someone pour their soul into a relationship, always initiating, always fixing, always being the bigger person. And every time they pulled away, even just a little, the other person would suddenly show interest. Not because they had changed, but because they could feel the energy shift. That's what you have to understand. People often don't change until their comfort is disrupted. Your consistent presence becomes expected. It loses its weight. But when you pull back with purpose, that absence becomes louder than any words you could have spoken. So how do you do it without turning cold? You stop pushing for connection and start protecting your peace. That's the key difference. You're not punishing them. You're realigning yourself. You're saying, I'm no longer going to fight to be chosen in a place where I keep feeling invisible. You stop explaining why you're pulling back. You just do it. You let your energy speak. When you stop texting first, stop over-explaining, stop rescuing, stop asking if they're okay, you send a signal, a strong one, that you are reclaiming your time, your energy, your worth. Yes, it might feel like abandonment at first. It might feel like you're giving up, but it's not. You're not quitting. You're choosing yourself. And there's a huge difference, because the people who genuinely value you, they'll feel that space you've created, and they'll come closer with intention. They'll match your energy. But the ones who only stayed for convenience, they'll disappear. And as painful as that is, it's clarity. You're not here to prove your worth. You're here to live it. And the people who can't handle your absence were never worthy of your presence. So here's the practical step. Don't ghost. Grow. Pulling back isn't about disappearing without explanation. It's about showing up differently. You still say good morning, but only if you mean it. You still answer messages, but you stop overextending. You still love, but from a place of strength, not desperation. You become intentional with your time, your words, your availability. When they used to get 100% of you, now they get what's left after you've given to yourself. And that's not selfish, it's self-protection. Because pouring into others while neglecting yourself is the fastest route to resentment. And if they ask what's changed, you don't need to give them a lecture. You just say, "I've realized I was overgiving. I'm working on balance." That's it. Let your new energy teach them. If they're wise, they'll adjust. If they're not, they'll resist. And that's your confirmation. Because here's the thing, not everyone deserves access to the evolved version of you. Some people only qualified for the old you, the one who didn't know boundaries, the one who gave without limits. And when you grow, their access expires. That's not cruelty, that's elevation. You're not hard to love, you're just not easy to manipulate anymore. That's the difference. And the moment you pull back with love, not hate, is the moment you step into your highest power. You're no longer trying to control how they see you. You're focused on how you see yourself. So if you're watching this and you've been pushing, trying, giving, begging, let this be your permission to stop. Not because you've failed, but because it's time to shift. Time to say, if it has to be forced, it's not mine. Write that in the comments right now. I no longer force energy. Let that be your reminder every time you feel the urge to chase or overextend. Because when you stop pushing forward and start pulling back, you create space. Space for peace, for clarity, for alignment. And you create discomfort in those who only stayed for comfort. That's when the real magic begins. They won't forget that feeling. Not because you were loud, but because your absence whispered something they weren't ready to hear. I'm no longer available at the cost of myself. And the next time you show up, if you choose to, you'll come from power, not pain, from choice, not survival, from wholeness, not lack. You're not just pulling back, you're pulling up. Number 4, your energy walks in before you do. Before you open your mouth, before you even step through the door. Your energy speaks. It's the quiet signal you send without trying, the atmosphere you carry, the emotional temperature that enters before your words ever do. It announces everything you've been through, everything you've let go of, and everything you no longer tolerate. That's why people feel you before they hear you. Let me ask you something. Have you ever met someone who didn't say much, but when they walked into a room, everyone noticed? It wasn't their clothes, it wasn't their looks. It was something else, a pull, a gravity, a confidence that wasn't loud but undeniable. That's what happens when someone has done the inner work, when they've stopped begging to be seen and started becoming impossible to ignore. Your energy becomes unforgettable when it is rooted in truth. Not perfection, not pride, but in alignment. And most people, especially the ones who once took you for granted, don't know how to respond to that kind of power, because they remember the old version of you, the one who tiptoed, who over-explained, who over-delivered. Now, you walk in fully aware of your value, and that alone shifts the dynamic. Here's the secret. Energy doesn't lie. It reflects everything you carry inside. If you're unsure of yourself, others feel it. If you're desperate for approval, they sense it. If you're healed, grounded, and clear, they don't just see it, they experience it. And when your energy changes, their behavior does too. Here's the mistake many people make. They try to change the outer layers, the way they dress, the way they speak, the way they posture. But none of that matters if the internal energy is still rooted in insecurity or fear. You can't fake alignment, you can't pretend peace, your energy always tells the truth. So what's the solution? Start living like your energy is your signature, because it is. Every room you enter, every relationship you invest in, every conversation you choose to have, you're either adding value or leaking power. And people can feel the difference. Let me give you something real. There was a woman who had been emotionally drained in a toxic relationship. They was constantly trying to be enough. They shrank themselves, apologized for having needs, dimmed their light just to maintain peace. But one day they stopped, not out of anger, but out of exhaustion. They began rebuilding, not loudly, but steadily. They changed her routines, started moving differently, speaking slower, laughing deeper. And the next time their ex saw them, they didn't recognize the energy. They wasn't cold, but they was untouchable. That's what true growth does. It changes your frequency, and the world notices. You don't need to tell people what version of yourself you've become. Just walk in it. Be the proof. So here's how you do it. First, get crystal clear on what you no longer allow. Not just from others, but from yourself. Your energy shifts the moment you stop entertaining what drains you. That means boundaries. That means intentional conversations. That means surrounding yourself with people who nourish your spirit, not test your limits. Second, clean up the internal dialogue. What are you telling yourself daily? Because that becomes the foundation of your energy. If your self-talk is full of doubt, apology, or self-rejection, your energy will carry that. But if it's rooted in self-worth, clarity, and love, people feel that shift without you saying a word. You stop chasing and start choosing. And third, stay grounded. Don't get lost trying to impress. Real power isn't about attention. It's about alignment. It's about walking into every situation knowing, I don't need to prove anything. I just need to be present. That presence alone sends a ripple through the room. And listen, there will be people who pretend not to notice. They'll act like you're the same person you used to be, like they can still access you the same way. Let them pretend, because deep down they feel it. They feel the way you pause longer before responding, the way you smile without needing validation, the way you move like your soul finally fits inside your body. They feel it, and it shakes them, because they remember the version of you that was desperate to be chosen. And now you've chosen yourself. And that energy hits different. It doesn't ask to be invited in, it simply exists, boldly, calmly, with intention. Here's something to remember. Your presence is your power, and that power doesn't need to be explained. It doesn't need to be marketed. It needs to be protected. That means protecting your peace, your time, your space, and your focus. That's how your energy becomes magnetic. So if you're watching this and you feel like you're still not being seen, here's your shift. Stop trying to be noticed. Start being aligned. Because the moment you become fully aligned with who you are, you'll stop needing people to recognize your value. Your energy will speak for itself. Say this with me in the comments. My energy speaks first. Because from now on, it will. You'll no longer beg. You'll no longer explain. You'll simply walk into rooms, into relationships, into life, and the energy you carry will say everything they need to know. You're not chasing impressions. You're making imprints. You don't have to convince anyone of your power. Just be so rooted in it that they can't forget the way it felt to be around you. And that's what we're building here. That kind of energy, the kind that enters first and stays long after you've left. Now stay with me, because the next move. We're going to talk about what happens when your absence becomes louder than your presence, and how to use that space to become unforgettable, not through what you do, but through who you've become. Number 5, make them feel your absence. There's a moment, and it always comes quietly, when the absence of someone becomes louder than their presence ever was, not because they stopped talking, but because their energy, their effort, their emotional availability has disappeared. That gap they once filled now echoes, and those echoes haunt people more than any confrontation ever could. But let's be honest, Most of us were never taught the power of absence. We were taught to stay, to fix, to explain, to hang on longer than we should. And in doing so, we trained others to expect our presence no matter how they treated us. Here's the truth you weren't told growing up. When you overstay in someone's life, your presence loses value. But when you pull back at the right moment, not out of spite but out of self-respect, you become unforgettable. You've probably felt this yourself. You didn't fully appreciate someone until they were gone. It wasn't until they stopped checking in, stopped texting, stopped pouring into you, that you felt the shift. That dull ache, that awareness that something valuable is no longer in reach. That's the power you carry too, but it only activates when you stop trying to be seen and start choosing to step back. Not because you're playing games, but because you've finally realized that your presence is a gift, not a given. Now here's the challenge. Pulling back feels unnatural at first. You'll want to explain. You'll want to make them understand. You'll want to double-check that they even noticed. But here's your freedom. You don't need to confirm whether they feel it. They do. They always do. Because absence is more than just physical space. It's emotional silence. It's the lack of good morning texts, the missing late-night calls, the warmth that's no longer offered on demand. And that absence makes people reflect. Not instantly, but eventually, especially the ones who thought you'd never stop showing up. So what's the solution? Don't pull back with bitterness. Pull back with purpose. You're not disappearing to hurt them. You're retreating to heal yourself, to recalibrate, to protect what's left of your energy and redirect it toward your own growth. That shift isn't cold. It's necessary. Let me give you something real. I knew a guy who was always available for the people he loved. Texts, favors, emotional support, you name it. But after years of being the one they called when things got messy, he realized something painful. They only valued him when it was convenient, so he stopped reaching out, stopped rescuing. He didn't cut anyone off, he just stopped overextending. And over time, guess what happened? The ones who truly cared showed up differently. The ones who didn't disappeared. That's how clarity is born, in the quiet. Because absence is a mirror. It shows people who they are without your light. And if they only loved you when you were accessible, your absence reveals that truth in a way words never could. So here's how you step into that power. Create intentional distance. That means stop initiating where effort isn't reciprocated. Stop offering your emotional availability to people who only call when they need something. Stop being the therapist, the cheerleader, the unpaid emotional laborer for people who don't even say thank you. It doesn't mean you hate them. It means you finally love yourself enough to pull your energy inward. And when that happens, something magical occurs. They feel the loss. Not because you rubbed it in their face, but because you removed something they were quietly depending on. The emotional safety net, the comfort of your presence, the validation they got from knowing you'd always be there. That's what makes absence powerful. It's not what you take away, it's what they realize they can't find anywhere else. And if they reach out, if they come back with, "Where have you been?" or "Why are you acting different?" you don't need to dramatize it. Just say this: "I've been focusing on myself." That's it. Let your energy finish the sentence. Let your peace say what your words never could. And if they don't reach out, if your absence goes unacknowledged, that's still a gift. Because now you know. Now you've cleared the space. Now you've stopped fighting for a seat at a table that never respected your hunger. Let your absence filter the room. Let it reveal who values you, not just when you're giving, but when you're gone. This doesn't just apply to relationships. It applies to every part of your life. Friendships, family, work, social circles, Anywhere your presence is expected but not respected, your absence becomes your boundary, a declaration of your worth without saying a single word. And no, it's not easy, especially if you're someone who's used to fixing, giving, saving. But here's a truth worth repeating. You are not here to carry people who won't even meet you halfway. So instead of asking, will they notice I'm gone? Start asking, what am I building with the space I've created? That's where your energy belongs. On you, on your peace, on your healing, on your next chapter. Say this with me in the comments right now. My absence teaches what my words never could. Let that be your mantra, your reminder that you don't need to explain your value anymore, just protect it. And the ones meant to feel it, they will. Whether today, tomorrow, or 5 years from now, they'll remember the warmth that left when you walked away. They'll remember how full they felt around you, how emotionally safe, how supported, and they'll realize it wasn't them, it was you. And by then, you'll be so far into your purpose, your power, your alignment, that you won't be hoping they reach out. You'll be too focused on everything you've become. So don't fear the quiet, don't fear the space. Let your absence echo in every place you once overgave, and trust that those echoes will do the work you never needed to. You're not pulling away out of fear. You're pulling into yourself out of love. Now stay with me, because the next part, we're going deeper into what happens when your very presence becomes a memory they can't escape. Not through revenge, not through attention, but through growth so undeniable it haunts the ones who never valued it when they had it. Ready for it? Let's keep going. Number 6. Become the memory they can't escape. There comes a moment when they stop remembering what you said and start remembering how it felt to be around you. Not your texts, not your efforts, not the things you gave them when they didn't deserve it, but the experience of your presence, your love, your belief in them, your softness, your strength, your stillness, your storm, all of it becomes a memory. And here's the twist. They never realize it until it's too late. When someone undervalues you, they're usually operating from comfort, from assumption, from the belief that you'll always be there, always be forgiving, always be waiting. But when you shift quietly, steadily, unapologetically, that comfort is replaced with confusion, and then regret, and then silence. Not your silence, theirs. You become the thought that lingers, the feeling that visits at 2 a.m., the energy that makes every new connection feel dull in comparison. Why? Because you gave them what most people never do: depth, real presence, pure intention, emotional safety. And when you leave, they realize they were never ready for it. They took it for granted, and now they can't recreate it. So how do you become that unforgettable energy? By healing without becoming bitter. That's the real magic. Anybody can detach out of rage. Anybody can walk away out of pride. But to love fully, to give fully, to get hurt, and still choose to grow without closing your heart, that's rare. That's what they'll remember. You become the memory they can't escape, not because you stayed longer, but because you finally left differently, stronger, wiser, sharper, and somehow still soft. You stopped explaining, you stopped chasing, you stopped shrinking, and you became someone you're proud of. And that version of you, it haunts them, not because you intended to, but because you became what they didn't believe you would, whole without them. That's what stings the most, not your anger, not your distance, but the fact that you didn't need closure from them to evolve. You became your own closure, and that makes you unforgettable. So what's the solution? Focus on building a life so full that no one gets to be the center of it unless they've earned it. You don't become memorable by performing. You become memorable by being real, by showing up for yourself first, by creating habits, routines, passions, goals, a reality so powerful that even your shadow carries weight. Let them feel it, not through your pain, but through your power. Every time they scroll, every time they laugh with someone new, every time they search for what you once gave freely, they'll come up empty. Because it wasn't the words, it was you, your presence, your frequency, your fire. And that's not something they'll find again. Not in the same way, not with the same purity. But by then, you won't be waiting for them to notice. You'll be too busy living, healing, elevating, attracting better, not because you're better than them, but because you finally realized what you bring to the table. And now, you won't seat anyone who only showed up to eat, not contribute. So here's your final move. Don't let them remember you for your hurt. Let them remember you for your healing, for the way you rose without resentment, for the glow you carried after the storm. Because that glow, that growth, that transformation, it becomes unforgettable. That's the imprint. That's the echo. Say it with me one last time in the comments. I became the memory. Because now you understand, you were never forgettable. They just weren't ready to feel the depth of what you brought. But now they do. And you don't need them to say it. You already know. You've already felt it in your peace, your confidence, your clarity. This is your moment. Not to get revenge, not to be seen, but to become. Become the energy that doesn't chase. Become the presence that doesn't beg. Become the version of you that they can't stop thinking about. Not because you tried harder, but because you stopped trying altogether. Thank you for staying with me through this journey. If this entire message spoke to you, if you felt the fire rising in your chest while listening, like this video, subscribe to the channel and drop your affirmation below. They'll never forget this version of me. Because the truth is they won't, and neither will you. This is the beginning of your rise. Own it.